I'm going to start the show today by talking a little bit about why I believe that the Georgia-Clemson game today on Saturday is actually a little bit more important than I think it's been given credit for. That, the thing that you hear is, well, the loser of the game is still very much in the college football playoff race, and some people have even said that the loser of the game is actually not going to drop very far in the rankings, and so it can be easily shaken off and can be easily – you can easily, get back into the college football playoff discussion. Even if that's true, and there's a very good chance that it is true, but even if that's true, I'm going to try to explain on today's show why I believe that the actual stakes for Georgia are much higher than that. By the way, we're now on Facebook and YouTube and everywhere else. So for those of you who are normally watching on other platforms, good to have all of you with us here today. Thanks so much for being with us. It's a lot for our buddy Michael Carvel, who's producing us, to do to keep up with like 87 different platforms and firing this one. He's a little bit like, you ever watch and I'm going to date myself with this reference. Like in the old days of like Late Night with David Letterman, Paul Schaefer, the leader of the band, had like 2 keyboards he had to play. Like that's a little bit like what our buddy Michael Carvel is like over there producing the show. But if you're just getting settled in, we did our 1st and 15 at DawgNation.com today. Had a really good time with that. We took some comments. We talked about some classic moments. Georgia-Clemson. We're going to do more of that with John Stinchcomb coming up. And, if you want to see 1st and 15 tomorrow, then just go to DawgNation.com or the DawgNation app, and you can watch that starting at 9:45. And, yes, we did start on time today. So give us a little bit of a pat on the back for all of that. Also, we said before, going to talk about the importance of Georgia-Clemson at the top of the program today. Going to correct myself on something I've been saying. I've been saying, hey, where's the hype for Georgia for this upcoming season? Well, if it wasn't here before, it is here now. We'll tell you about that on the show. And John Stinchcomb today, we're going to back him into a corner. We're going to force him to tell us exactly how Georgia gets a win against Clemson on Saturday. That is going to be good times all the way around. We think it's going to be a good show. We think it's going to be the start of a great week. We are glad to have you with us for it. It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Your long wait is over. It is game week for Georgia and Clemson, and, man, it's a fun one. And, listen, I got the butterflies in my stomach, and you only get that a few times a year, right? You're lucky as a sports fan to have these moments because it reminds me of, I think I've said this before, something Tony La Russa, the former manager of the Cardinals, once said. It's like you can't sleep, you can't eat, you can't get comfortable, and you want to feel that way all the time. That's just what the great sporting moments provide for you, that angst. And as a fan of Georgia against a big team, big game on Saturday, Clemson, I got that angst. Most regular season college football games for a program the caliber of the Bulldogs, most games don't provide that level of energy. This one clearly does. I'm sure many of you feel the same way that I do, and you're glad that you feel that way. You're glad that you wake up on this Monday. The world just feels a little different, right? The sun shines a little brighter. The faint breeze that you occasionally get feels a little bit more enjoyable. The whole thing just feels a little different knowing that it is truly a game week. And there is one point that I'm going to try to, hammer home pretty hard here over the course of the next 5 days, or I guess not counting today, 4 days, leading up to game day for Georgia and Clemson. And that is my belief that the game itself actually has more at stake than some people are kind of giving it credit for. The overall consensus seems to be, well, hey, it's 2 good teams, 2 highly ranked opponents, and the loser of this game can easily shake it off, run the table after that, and still have a chance to make the college football playoff. And here's the point I'm going to make to you. That even if that is true, and there's a chance that it is, I think the stakes for Georgia actually go even higher than that. And as a way of setting all of this up, let me go to a podcast for a moment that I kind of enjoy. It's not like probably the most famous podcast out there for college football. It's just kind of one that I like. It is from the ESPN family. You see the Bear, Chris Felica, on ESPN College Game Day. You see Stanford Steve sometimes if you watch the Scott Van Pelt Sports Center. They're kind of like gambling guys. They get together and talk about college football from a gambling perspective. And on one of their shows a couple of weeks ago, they were talking about Georgia-Clemson. And I've heard this sentiment expressed a lot of different ways, but as just kind of a snapshot of kind of what some are saying about what Georgia-Clemson means and what it doesn't mean here this Saturday, let me give you an idea of kind of what the snapshot, the synopsis of all of this is. And then I'm going to try to tell you after that why I believe that common opinion is probably wrong. This is the Bear and Stanford Steve from the ESPN family of podcasts talking about the value, the importance of Georgia Clemson. Take a listen to this.
I have one thought for you to ponder.
Mm-hmm.
Does Clemson, Georgia really mean anything? As in the grand scheme of things, looking down the road, does that game mean anything for the national championship?
It means
It
means something for the winner. I think the winner of that game gets a potential, I don't want to say mulligan, but they get an extra bargaining chip. They get a nice little investment in the bank in the kitty to potentially down the road, where if they do happen to slip up later in the year, they can point to that win over the other team as a very strong resume builder for the college football play. But I know exactly where you're headed.
So I think it's interesting to hear the Bear and Stanford Steve from ESPN saying that. And let me talk about the tangible thing that the Bear, Chris Felica, who you heard him address, and I'm going to talk about something that's a little bit more, I guess, intangible, but maybe the more important factor for Georgia against Clemson coming up on Saturday. First of all, the tangible part of this is true, that the winner of this game buys themselves some leverage. Now, Clemson typically doesn't need that leverage because it's in an ACC, kind of a weak league, and it's fairly easy to run the table throughout all of that. But as I've said before, you want to talk about Georgia fans getting their battle gear on. Let a Clemson team lose to Georgia week one, run the table, win the ACC after that. You better believe that Georgia fans, regardless of their status as SEC champion, are going to want to see Georgia in the playoff over Clemson, regardless of its status as ACC champion, because in that particular instance, Georgia would have won head-to-head. So I think the Bear is right when he says, listen, the winner of this game provides themselves a little bit of cushion, if nothing else, in comparison to the team that they beat, because you want those head-to-head games to matter there. So the winner of this game ought to buy themselves a little something. For Georgia in 2018, who played close against Alabama, who lost that game and had to listen to guys like Kirk Herbstreit on ESPN TV that Saturday night in December of 2018 saying, we think that Georgia's one of the four best teams in the country. Ultimately, the committee itself ignored all of that. How nice would it have been for that Georgia team to have had a win against a program the caliber of Clemson to bolster that argument as truly being one of the four best teams in the country, even though it's only SEC runner-up. So I think that is a very fair, interesting thing for the Bear to say is, you can't say this game means nothing for the winner. The loser may still have plenty of football left to overcome the victory, or should I say overcome the defeat, but the winner actually gets something that later on it can use. That's a pretty nice trophy to have on the wall come week one. But ultimately, though, and this is, I think, the place we need to spend some time here this week. Ultimately, though, the real value of the game from Georgia's side is not the tangible thing I just explained there. It may be the more intangible thing. And this is one of those things where I have to probably say something that maybe some Georgia fans would, I guess, prefer not be true, maybe prefer not to have pointed out, but I do think it needs to be pointed out. Think about like the big wins that Kirby Smart's gotten since he's come to Georgia, and the big losses that he's taken since coming to Georgia. You know, if you look at the big wins, it's a couple of times against Notre Dame. It's the 2017 SEC championship against Auburn. It's obviously the Rose Bowl against Oklahoma, biggest win of all. It's a couple of very important wins against Florida, 2018, 2019. A lot of folks remember the blowout win against Mississippi State back when the Maroon Bulldogs were only a 3-point underdog coming into Athens. That was a game where a lot of folks were kind of talking about, Georgia getting upset there in Sanford Stadium. Georgia won like 37-3. Like those are like the big wins that Georgia has gotten under Kirby Smart. And there's nothing to apologize about any of those wins. If you want to add the Peach Bowl last year against a top 10 Cincinnati team, you could do that. But the coaches that Georgia beat, Kirby Smart himself beat in those games, you're talking about Luke Fickell, who's never really won anything. You're talking about Brian Kelly, who's been to a couple college football playoffs, played for a BCS title, but hasn't come within 7 yards of actually winning one of those games. You're talking about Dan Mullen, who's never really won anything. You're talking about Gus Malzahn, who played for a title in 2013, did win an SEC championship, but for the most part was kind of below the caliber of national championship winning coaches. I kind of did some of this off the the back of a cocktail napkin getting ready for the show. The national championship winning coach that Kirby Smart has beaten was Jimbo Fisher in 2019. Now, that's Fisher was kind of in a different place in his career with that Aggies team than even he is now, with Texas A&M kind of ranked in the top 10 and far removed from the 2013 season where he'd won the thing at Florida State. But if you want to think about like college football playoff era national champions, Smart's played 5 of those, and he's lost all 5. And he's lost each of those 5 games by an average of 15 points. So this is the intangible thing that Kirby Smart and Georgia are playing for week 1 on Saturday. This would be a level of achievement for Georgia that up to this point in time has not been unlocked. Listen, beating Oklahoma is a big win. That's an Oklahoma team that hasn't won a college football playoff game yet. They've been fairly well humiliated in some of those things. Dan Mullen, those wins against Florida in 18 and 19 years like that's a big win. But Dan Mullen's not a championship-level coach. Dabo Swinney is. He's won 2 college football playoff national championships. And you can mock him for the ACC stuff and the fact that's a weak league, and it truly is. But he's beaten Alabama twice on the way to winning national championships. For Kirby, to beat Dabo head-to-head would be a very big deal. In some ways, it'd only be symbolic because you still got a whole football season to play after that. But symbolism in this case would matter. It would be proof of something that Georgia fans believe and just need to see some evidence to prove it to everybody else. Georgia fans believe their program is on par with the very best programs in the country, and it has probably suffered a little bit from the fact that it's only able to be compared to whoever the best team in the SEC happens to be in any given year. In the last couple of years, best team in the SEC has literally been one of the best teams of all time in college football. LSU in 2019, Alabama last year, on and on you could go with that. This is a chance for Georgia to compare themselves to someone else. National championship winning coach in Dabo Swinney, but not quite the same level of historic achievement that recent SEC champions who've also gone on to win national championships have gone on to do. So this is a very important measuring stick for Georgia. It's the kind of game that proves what's possible for Georgia maybe at the end of the season. It's the kind of game that unlocks a level of achievement that Kirby Smart, for everything that he has done at Georgia, the kind of thing that he hasn't quite done yet. College football playoff winning national champion winning coach, a chance to beat that guy head-to-head. It's the kind of thing that would make even more believers out of folks in DawgNation about what UGA can do, and maybe even earn some praise for the Dogs outside the bubble of the fan base that we're all a part of here. So don't say that Georgia-Clemson doesn't mean anything on Saturday. As the Bear, Chris Felica said, it means something for the winner, but if it's Georgia that wins the game, it means a whole lot more for it. Because all of a sudden now you're talking about Georgia being in a much, much different category than it's been up until now. It's one of the reasons that I can't wait for Saturday to get here. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We kicked off our brand new 1st and 15 this morning on the DawgNation homepage, the DawgNation app. How much fun was that to be able to deliver video, especially to those platforms? I mean, listen, you got to understand something. Like, it wasn't that long ago, just a few years ago, I was doing this thing in a closet in my house, and all of a sudden now we've got like video starting at different platforms on different times, and you got a squirrel back there, just kind of running on a hamster wheel to make all this work. So it's pretty amazing to be able to see, and I'm really happy to be able to do it all. And of course, we wouldn't be able to deliver this for you if it wasn't for our great sponsor, our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Not only do they help us keep the lights on here and deliver this content to you each and every day, they also can equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. And listen, you think about a weekend like we had where it's 1,000 degrees, right? You don't want that hot air coming into your house. Energy-efficient windows and doors prevents that from happening. Also, all like the bugs and stuff like that are always swimming around here, floating around here in the summertime because it's so hot, keep that stuff on the outside too. Keep the cold air where it's supposed to be inside the house. The junk from the outside, keep that where it's supposed to be. That's what better windows and doors can do for you. And that's what Pella Window and Door for you can do for you there as well. Locally owned branch right here in Georgia. That means great service. Family-inspired service, really, and think about the nationally known brand that Pella is. Really get the best of both worlds on all of that. Also, great savings between now and September 16th as well. You can replace all your windows with payments as low as $99 a month, or you can get 10% off qualifying installations. A couple different ways to get in touch. Give them a call, 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496. or visit pellaofga.com/DawgNation. That's pellaofga.com/DawgNation. And tell them that BA from DawgNation Daily said they would take good care of you, because I truly know that they will. All right, it's John Stinchcomb here coming up in a moment. He'll take good care of us with a Classic City Lager Insider Update. John will give his thoughts on how the Dogs can get it done on Saturday. I'm really looking forward to being able to do that. Before we do that with John, and also before we're done today's show, kind of a closer look at what's happening at Clemson right now. You know, Clemson's the favorite. Clemson's the more nationally known brand because they've been in the college football playoff every year since 2015. But they are not without their concerns. They are not without their issues as we head towards Saturday. And we'll address some of that in just a moment for the Tigers before we're done on today's show. But for now, let's go around the doghouse. And it's assisted today by our friends at AAA. And I got to correct the record on something. You've heard me now for a while say, where's the big hype for Georgia? You know, this hype for Georgia that everybody keeps talking about, Georgia hyped up again. You've heard me say, I haven't really heard that hype. In fact, it was kind of a big enough deal that a couple of weeks ago on the show, we brought Peter Burns from the SEC Network on the show because Peter was one of the ones who was picking Georgia to win the national championship. Well, if Peter was first man through the door, there's a whole host of folks following him. And listen, you know, some Georgia fans like it. They like to be thought of as a team that can win the national championship. Some Georgia fans don't want that hype. They don't want, as Nick Saban was famous for describing, they don't want the rat poison that goes along with that. You can decide for yourself kind of, you know, if you want it or not, care about it or not. But it's important for me to note that, boy, things have kind of changed a little bit since I last told you. There was no hype around Georgia. Let's start with ESPN College Game Day on Saturday. A couple of the hosts on the show, including the former Georgia great David Pollack and the legendary TV figure, although now kind of in the winter of his career, Lee Corso, both Pollack and Corso made their case for Georgia to win the title. So here around the doghouse, assisted by AAA, let me let you hear Game Day from Saturday.
But here's mine. Got Alabama, Oklahoma, Georgia, Ohio State. I told you Alabama would win the SEC championship game. Yep. Georgia will beat them in the Natty. Wow.
Okay.
All right. Georgia will beat them in the Natty.
Got you. Oklahoma, Clemson, Ohio State, and Georgia. The winner, Georgia. They haven't won a national championship in 41 years. 41 years.
This is the year.
Georgia. Go Dogs. Go Georgia.
And Coach Corso were all fully brief in the 41 years thing. You don't have to quite hammer that point home quite so much. But interesting to hear both Pollack and Corso making their case. On the case for Pollack, I mean, it is interesting that he's got Georgia winning the title via the route that Alabama followed in 2017, not winning the SEC, although I guess in this case David does has Georgia as the SEC runner-up, and then making the college football playoff as a second SEC team. We saw a conference championship game loser make the title game a year ago with Notre Dame, so from that standpoint, it's another reason why that Georgia-Clemson game probably means a little bit more than you otherwise might think, because Georgia making the playoff as a second SEC team seems like a virtual impossibility if you don't at least have the head-to-head win versus Clemson. So the path that Pollack has Georgia traveling to win a national championship, that seems just the prerequisite for that would seem to be that week one game against Clemson. So another reason why that game truly matters, and in kind of the tangible on-field results kind of way, not just the symbolic way that I spoke about before. But wait, that's not all, because in addition to Pollack and Corso making their case on ESPN's Game Day, there's also the Big Noon, what is it called? Big Noon Saturday? At the Fox Sports Show. One of their analysts is former Oklahoma coach Bob Stoops. Stoops also on TV on Saturday. I don't have the audio for this, but he made his prediction for Georgia there as well. Can we show this on the screen? He says, and he went on to talk about, this is kind of a long-ranging opinion from Stoops. He mentions the fact that Alabama seems to only win national championships every other year. I don't know if that means that Stoops is like a believer in astrology. Somehow it's not possible for Alabama to win back-to-back titles. They did do that in 2011 and 2012, I guess. Stoops was still coaching then, so maybe he didn't notice. But he kind of brings some astrology into all of this. They don't do it in opposite years. They only do it in every other year scenarios. But he also talked about JT Daniels and the boost that he provided the Georgia offense when he came in for the last 4 games last year, the recruiting success Georgia has. And Stoops finally concluded by saying, I think Georgia would be one to be poised to do it all or have a chance to. Now, we got to coach Stoops on the hot take stuff. Like, you can't tell me Georgia's going to win it all or at least have a chance to. We already know they have a chance to win it all. It sounds like Stoops wanted to make the case for Georgia actually doing that, but kind of backed off that there at the end. But ultimately, This is kind of what all of this comes down to, right? Georgia does kind of swing on that pendulum between team that has a chance to win it all versus team that actually will win it all. And Lee Corso said, 1980 since Georgia won the national championship. All of that's ancient history. None of that factors into the Georgia discussion right now. The thing that matters more than anything else is the last couple of years where Georgia has been that team of, are they a shortlist contender who could win it all, or is this the team that gets the luck that it needs, the health that it needs, the performance from the top-end players that it needs, the decision-making in-game from the coaches that it needs? Is this the year it puts it all together and actually becomes the team that goes from could win it all to a team that does win it all? Well, there is some hype growing that maybe Georgia will be that bunch, and interesting to see that on TV on Saturday. That is Around the Doghouse. It's assisted today by our friends at AAA, and don't forget about this when it comes to AAA. We talk about legendary roadside assistance with AAA, but also think about them as well when it comes to your auto insurance there too. Because when you switch and save with AAA, you can save on average $529. Incredible savings there. $529 on average you save. Just go to the website. It's AAA.com/auto insurance. That's AAA.com/auto insurance. Switch and save today with AAA. All right. The most talked about thing of the weekend was probably something that had, well, not too much to do with college football, but you better believe that college football fans were noticing it in a big way. We'll tell you about that before we're done on today's program. As I said before, we'll also kind of go back through here and look at what's happening over at Clemson right now as the Tigers get ready to figure out what they got to do to get ready to beat Georgia, some issues along the offensive line. We will address all of that before we're done. But for now, on everything for Georgia-Clemson, what it's going to take to win this game for the Dogs on Saturday, the growing hype around Georgia-Clemson that we discussed a moment ago, and a look back at one of the most memorable wins for the Dogs in this series. Let's do it all right now with our good friend John Stinchcomb. It's a Classic City Lager Insider Update, and it's great to have all of you with us here today.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
It is game week, and no better person to kick off game week with than a guy that knows a lot about these game weeks. He's played in them. He's followed them as a fan of the Dogs in his post-playing career, and a good friend of ours here. It's a Classic City Lager Insider Update with John Stinchcomb right now. John, to me, maybe this is kind of a dumb thing to say, but you wake up this morning, you're just going to feel a little bit different, right? It's like the last few weeks. Obviously, I love the summer and I like all that kind of stuff. But man, when you show up to work knowing you're only a few days away from being in Charlotte, getting ready to get it taped up for a game like this, I'm sorry, the energy just flows a little better on a day like this, I think.
I can't wait. I know we're not alone. It's finally football week. And a big one for the Dogs. I mean, coming up against Clemson, obviously, since they had it on the calendar, everyone knew this was going to be a huge game. But now it's only a few days away, and we can stop prognosticating and wondering what's going to happen and who's going to be out there and how are the Dogs going to look this year. We're finally able to figure out and see what exactly we're going to deploy on Saturday.
Yeah, so before we get into that game deeply, because I do want to do that with you here today, let me let you piggyback off what I was just talking about a moment ago, which is, for a while this summer it seemed like there weren't a lot of, big, bold predictions in favor of Georgia. SEC Media Days kind of came and went without a lot of that, but over the course of the weekend, you started to see that change a bit. David Pollack, Lee Corso both picked Georgia to win the national championship. Bob Stoops came very close on Fox to picking Georgia to win the national championship. All of a sudden, what seemed like a little bit of a hype-free summer for UGA, now the week of the game starts to feel a little bit different in that regard. I'm the kind of person that I guess I'd rather have the media picking me than not because it makes me more relevant in the conversation. But what do you make of what seems to be some growing buzz around Georgia here just a few days before the season opener?
I think it's funny because for months I've heard my buddies, Georgia fans, former Georgia teammates, fuss about how Georgia's underrated and how can they not show the respect for this program. And I really feel like there's so many great pieces in place, especially with the transfer additions. And then you get to this week, and Pollack picks them, and Corso picks them, and they're like, "Oh no, we're cursed! Why would they hex us with these labels of we can take it all. So it's just funny. I think to show the level of respect that Georgia has garnered on a national scale just because of what they've been able to accumulate. And, let's be honest, B.A., this training camp has been a rough one for the Dogs. And the number of players that have been affected by injury and, off-field personal, mental issues. I mean, it's been significant. And to head into this game and national pundits still believe that Georgia has what it takes, I think is a testament to the work and just overall organization that Coach Smart and his staff have put together. I mean, you look at the roster, and it's a deep one, and it's needed to be, and we haven't even played a week one. Wide receivers, tight ends specifically, just the number of guys and names that have been injured. I mean, what program out there could you lose a George Pickens and then pick up a guy like Gilbert, and neither are going to be available week one and still feel like, hey, I think we've got enough horses in the stable to get in this race. So I think it's just a testament to the overall program that they've created and the depth that allows teams to be in this national conversation, if nothing else, early in the season.
I think that's a great point. And I want to look more deeply at Georgia Clemson now. I don't want to poison the well with this question. I have a picture in my mind of what I think a Georgia win versus Clemson looks like. I'm curious for you to tell me what you think it looks like, whether you want to take this from the approach of keys to victory or just kind of the image that gets conjured up in your mind if you think about Georgia being happy on Saturday night. What does it take for Georgia to beat Clemson on Saturday?
Well, let's start defensively. I think you have to affect the quarterback, and I think we need that emergence of – I expect the defensive line to be a strong suit for Georgia throughout this entire season, right? Like interior-wise, you've got some studs that continue to come back and anchor this front. Davis, the return of Devontae Wyatt and Rochester, I think, is underrated. Those three guys alone solidify the interior of that D-line. What I think matters most against Clemson is edge pressure. How can we get the pressure on the quarterback and affect their passing game? Because quite honestly, if I'm Clemson, I'm coming into this game and I'm saying I want to air it out. I want to see what they've got in this back end and put it in the arm of my stud star quarterback that no one really knows what to expect other than the potential that he's brought to this program. So that's where I'd start. I want to see, keys to victory for Georgia starts at affecting the pass rusher. And offensively, it's the converse, right? So Clemson's got arguably one of the best defensive fronts in college football. How does our O-line match up with them? I think the ability to minimize the effects of Breesy and Murphy and that entire defensive front for Clemson is going to be a key. Keeping JT Daniels clean and open up holes for our running backs. You could say this every week, but when you go up against Clemson, if they're able to rush just 4 and play coverage in the back end and you don't have an answer for that, that's how it played out in the Super Bowl. You watch that Kansas City offensive front struggle against a pass rush that was only bringing 4, and it's a miserable experience. There's not a lot of answers you can have as a coordinator when the defense that you're facing is able to rush just 4 guys and still be effective. So I think that's the marquee matchups that you circle in this game.
I think that's all very well said. Obviously, John, want this to be like a 40-plus point per game offense for Georgia. That's what it may take to win a national championship. I don't believe, though, that's where Georgia is right now. At least that's the sneaking suspicion that I get. Maybe I'm, affected by some of the things I've heard. But the UGA offense in recent days, or maybe that really is true. But this might not quite be as powerful of an offense right now as it could be at the end of the season. I still think it takes 30-plus points to win this game. I don't believe the winning team scores in the 20s on Saturday. I believe it's probably in the 30s. But as you said, finding a way to get to 30, but finding a way to hold Clemson below that 30-point mark, finding a way to Look at a team breaking in a new full-year season starting quarterback, new weapons at running back, new weapons at wide receiver, finding a way to go out there. I'm not saying hold them to 13 points because I don't think you can do that. I mean, that's just not what college football is these days. But finding a way to hold them to 24 and then, find a way to win this game 31-24 or 35-28 or something along those lines. I mean, to me, 24, 27 points, that feels like good defense in 2021, just to be completely honest with you, especially if that comes along with a few negative plays that stop would-be scoring drives, figuring out a way to get yourself in the 30s. To me, that's the way this game probably plays out on Saturday. That's probably more points than Vegas is expecting, more points than some fans are expecting. But while I don't think it's going to be played in the 40s, I don't see it being 21-17 either, I guess.
No, I would say, I'm with you in taking the over, and I'm going to say something really groundbreaking that the fans are going to be shocked to hear, but I think turnovers is going to play a big part in this game. I think, yep, isn't this shocking, PA?
First time I've heard that in the breakdown of a football game, yeah.
Yep. It's crazy. But there's so many, on both sides, both teams, there's so many new pieces, and part of Georgia's issue is not the quarterback situation that we entered into the season last year with, but just the availability of wide receivers and being on the same page in that vein. That's the concern for Georgia. If I'm Clemson, there are so many new faces. I mean, good ones, right? I mean, they keep their cupboards pretty full as well, but it's different when the live bullets are fired and you're out on the field, and I think that's why I say affecting the passer is such a key for Georgia. You want to rush a young quarterback that hasn't had the game experience of some of these seasoned vets, which is lacking across the board on the national scale of these top 5 teams. I mean, outside of Rattler, you look at it and say there's a lot of really marquee programs that don't have returning quarterbacks. I think that's a strength of Georgia's, but where are we at chemistry-wise with so many of the weapons and wide receivers that JT Daniels should have at his disposal unavailable? So I think the ability for this Georgia defense to affect the Clemson passing game, get in the backfield, and force some bad decisions is going to be a real key for this game.
I want to look back at a great moment for you against Clemson coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, let me remind folks, this is our Classic City Lager Insider Update with our great former Georgia All-American, good friend John Stinchcomb here. And, of course, as all of you are getting ready for the game on Saturday, getting stocked up for your tailgate is a big part of that. And let me encourage you, as you're getting stocked, to think about my friends at Classic City Lager from Creature Comforts Brewing Company. A great taste of Athens, but you don't have to be in Athens to get it. This is available, a great-looking can, by the way, available in 6- and 12-pack cans. Wherever you're doing your shopping, you can pick up some Classic City Lager from Creature Comforts Brewing Company. It's available all year long, but it tastes good this time of year as we're heading towards the fall. It's a lager-style beer, which means it's a lighter beer, easy drinking beer. But listen, for those of you that love that crisp, bold flavor, you get plenty of that when it comes to Classic City Lager there as well, because it's really a craft-style lager beer. So that's a fun thing all the way around. Really complex flavor notes, really delicious, but easy to drink there. It's really kind of the best of all worlds for those of you that are looking for a terrific beer choice. We head towards game day. Classic City Lager, a great one. My intel tells me there's going to be plenty of Classic City Lager on the DawgNation Express bus on the the DawgNation Invasion, I should say, the DawgNation Invasion bus on the way to Charlotte on Saturday. So I am excited for the folks who get a chance to enjoy that. John, you had a chance going back 2002 to enjoy what Dog players hope they get a chance to enjoy this Saturday night. That's a win against Clemson. And I talked to some of our video audience before our show began today of, that was a big moment, I thought, for Coach Richt, right after an 8-4 season in 2001, which included the Hobnail Boot game. But, when you're trying to establish a program, there's some challenging early days. And the 2002 win against Clemson, not a great Clemson team probably that year, but the kind of moment that I thought set the stage for the run that you all went on to eventually win the SEC championship. It was a great day for DJ Shockley, of course, against Clemson. Georgia kind of played 2 quarterbacks there that day. When you think back to your own win and your senior season against Clemson, what comes to mind for you?
Well, I think it comes what pops out first is in the fourth quarter, we were trying to run the 4-minute drill, just run out the clock, and keep possession of the ball, not give it back to Clemson. And we were doing a pretty good job of it. But Coach Rick challenged the offense, and there was a fourth down conversion, fourth and short, that we came away with. And it sealed the deal. And after the game, as a elder statesman, I'm sticking around and had to do some media interviews, and I ended up saying, they're asking about the call. What did I think of Coach Rick in this call? And there was a little bit of my description involved brass and certain body part, which, total locker talk, right? And I got called into Coach Rick's office the next morning and was like, probably not the best choice of words there in describing it, but, for the program overall, it was a big win. I mean, I think it set the tone early and said that we've got what it takes and the right mettle, if you will, to just have a great season next year. But, those are the first couple things that stick out. And, Clemson wasn't the program they are now, but it was still an early test for us. And, those are defining. Those create identity for any team. When you play in those big games early on and you come through that test a little better, having won, and said, you know what, I kind of like what we have in this locker room. So, yes, these early games, they don't matter quite as much as those last games when you get closer to the college football playoffs and the national implications of the end-of-the-year games, but they most certainly matter when you're talking about creating identity and building confidence and setting the tone for a season.
It's a great story, and as you tell it, I'm actually remembering. I'd almost forgotten about that, but you're right. It's the key play of the game, and what we should make sure the audience understands is the fourth and short that y'all converted to close that game out came deep in your own territory. This was not going for it from the Clemson 35. This was going for it from deep in Georgia territory here. Now, later on in subsequent years, that's something that Bill Belichick started doing more. I think your old pro coach Sean Payton, went for it in his own territory a few times, but that was not a very common thing to do in college football back in 2002, was to go for it in your own territory. Rick took a lot of heat for even making the choice, although it worked. But I think your description of that actually ends up being, pretty appropriate. That, listen, if you trust your offensive line, if you trust Musa Smith enough to get that first down in that situation there, that's showing a lot of confidence in your team. And it was certainly an unorthodox decision for that time and place in which it happened.
Yeah, and the era has certainly changed. But, going for it on fourth down was almost taboo. And anytime it's on your side of the 50, you just know that it's going to be highly scrutinized. And for him to have the confidence, and I think justifiably so, we had 6 senior or close to it offensive linemen and a Musa Smith at the running back who, if you can't get a yard, we're gonna have a rough season. That was kind of our mindset, and luckily we were able to prove him right in that decision. But it most certainly was not in vogue during those years to challenge the status quo of, if it's fourth down on your side of the 50, you got to punt it.
Well, I'll tell you this, the mindset y'all took into that game and closed that game out with in 2002 sounds like a pretty good mindset for this Georgia team on Saturday there as well. John, thanks for telling us that story. So entertaining, and thanks for your insight and thoughts on how Georgia gets it done this upcoming Saturday there as well. Terrific stuff. Appreciate you being here for our Classic City Lager Insider Update, and we will look forward to getting a chance to speak with you very soon, too.
Next time we're in the Classic City Lager Update, we're going to be talking about football that we got to see the previous weekend. And so I can't wait, and it's going to be a good weekend for the Dogs. I feel confident. I can't wait to watch them take the field against Clemson.
Great stuff, John. Thanks for your time.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, it's a fun story from John Stinchcomb. 2002. I remember that day very well. Big day from DJ Shockley, but as John said, also a big day for Coach Rick. And for some reason, a lot of y'all probably have this very much at the forefront of your memory. For some reason, I just sort of forgotten about big, gutsy call. As John said, there's an apt way to describe that maybe Would shocked some folks back then, but that's about right in terms of the brass ones it took to make that decision. And the Georgia offensive line, led in part by John Stinchcomb, goes out there and gets that done. That's a fun thing to look back on, and a really good thing from John Stinchcomb all the way around there. Now, I'll transition now to our SEC through, and obviously this is a little bit, shifting gears without a clutch here. A lot less enjoyable subject right now is some of what's going on in the state of Louisiana. Obviously, it's always that thing in this time of year, this part of the world, that as we think about the start of college football season, we also think about the time in which the hurricane season's really kind of kicking into gear, right? August turns to September, into October. Those are obviously high volume months for tropical weather and bad storms. And obviously, Louisiana has been hit hard here, like a 16-year anniversary, I guess, from Hurricane Katrina. And so you're hearing this a lot from around the SEC right now, and we're obviously here at DawgNation Daily very much of the same mind. Sincere prayers. And you say, hey, prayers go out. I mean, I try to be the kind of person that if I'm going to say I'm praying for you, I'm going to really pray for you. At least that's the mindset that I try to have. And so, sincerely speaking, I'll be praying for folks that I know in Louisiana, folks that I know of, have not met. That state's been through a lot, and this is another example of that. And obviously, a lot of the SEC kind of feels the same way. There's football implications to all this. Oklahoma is actually supposed to play at Tulane in New Orleans on Saturday. We'll see how that's impacted by all of this. Obviously, LSU had kind of made some plans to be displaced, knowing the weather was coming. So we'll follow the football side of this in the days ahead. But for right now, it's more of a human story. And obviously, we want to be a part of that. I know many of you all feel the same way on that. So this is a fun, happy day for us. But obviously, for the folks in Louisiana, a lot of folks dealing with some real challenges there. And so that will not be far from our mind at any point in time as they do that. And once again, kind of awkward segue back into the enjoyable part of the conversation. One of the things that we'll do a lot in the days to come, talk about some of the bigger games in the SEC towards Saturday. And LSU in Pasadena against UCLA will certainly be one of those, as well as like Miami, Alabama, and Ole Miss and Louisville. There's some fun games to talk about. There are also some of these kind of like big point spreads for SEC teams playing, group of five type teams, that I do think are worthy of some attention. A few of these, not all of them are necessarily interesting, but a few of these I think are probably pretty interesting. So before we get into like the bigger games over the course of the week, let me highlight a couple of SEC teams facing pretty big point spreads on Saturday, and I'll tell you why I think these games in particular are pretty interesting. Can we show these on the screen here for a moment? All these lines come courtesy of our friends at BetUS. So let's start on Thursday with Bowling Green against Tennessee. Tennessee's about a 34.5-point favorite there against Bowling Green. Now, I think that Tennessee's awful. I think if you're thinking about gambling stuff, season win total over-unders, Tennessee is at 6. I think the under on that's a really good play. But let's watch this on Saturday, or I should say on Thursday. If this is a Tennessee team that moves the football against a bad Bowling Green team, start thinking about this, the idea that Tennessee's going to lose, but also score points a lot this season. So if you're interested in, I'm going to use a fancier word than I should. If you're interested in the idea of an arbitrage here a little bit, a slight hedge if you need it, but also a chance to double up when possible, think about Tennessee at BetUS as a season win total under, but possibly single game point total overs. Like I said, that gives you a chance to kind of play both sides of the coin there a little bit. What the Vols do against Bowling Green on Thursday may go some ways towards determining that. KJ Jefferson going to get a chance to make his debut as the full season starter for Arkansas against Rice on Saturday. This is an Arkansas team that I don't think is competitive in the SEC West, but I do think has a chance to beat Texas. And so seeing how the Razorbacks with the Kendall Briles offense move the football against the Owls coming up on Saturday, can they cover that 19.5-point number? I think that ends up being pretty interesting. Missouri is also a team that I like a little bit. They're actually a fairly narrow favorite against the Chippewas of Central Michigan. The honest truth is, I don't know if Central Michigan's good or what, but that's a smaller number than I thought it would be. Missouri's a team that I think can go 8-4. I think can beat a couple of teams in the SEC East, certainly have a chance to beat Arkansas as well. They're a crossover rival. So less than a 2-touchdown favorite may be worth your time. Then finally there's this, and I'll make this very quick. Kentucky is, I've got it there at 19.5, but I think I actually, that is an error on my part. So if you're watching this, be careful. I made an error. Kentucky is a 29.5-point favorite against Louisiana Monroe, and 29.5 actually may not be enough points. Typically speaking, you're not maybe all that interested in these huge point total spreads. Y'all, do some due diligence on Louisiana Monroe. there's a chance this is the worst team in the country. Terry Bowden's the coach there. I think Rich Rodriguez, maybe the offensive coordinator. Their season win total is only like a game and a half, 1.5 wins. The number I have on the screen, that's my error. It's actually 29.5, but they may win by 39.5. So do your due diligence on that. Pay close attention to the Wildcats. And then there's this. And all of what I just said was the precursor to build to this. Florida hosts Florida Atlantic. Florida is favored by 24.5 points at last check. Y'all be really careful with Florida Atlantic for a moment. Now, I'm not telling you they're going to win the game. That's not what I'm saying here. Just be really careful with a Florida Atlantic team that brings back a ton of starters. Mike Stoops is the defensive coordinator there. There's already been some talk that maybe it hasn't been the world's greatest summer for Emory Jones. I'm not telling you to, get settled in front of your TV with popcorn in hand for Florida Atlantic and Florida. But as you're going about your day on Saturday, getting ready for the Dogs in Clemson that night, just keep your eye out for maybe this one, to quote the legendary words of Coach Corso. Just keep your eye out on the Florida Atlantic. I believe it's also the Owls. We had 2 Owls in that graphic a moment ago, Rice and Florida Atlantic. Keep your eyes on Florida Atlantic to maybe be closer than the experts think against Florida in week 1. That could end up being a little bit fun there for a Florida Atlantic team that has got a lot of experience, pretty good coaching staff, and could maybe find a way to kind of game plan on Saturday as the hopes of keeping it somewhat close, because they know they'll get some in-state cachet for doing that. Just keep that in mind as we head towards Saturday. The most talked about story of the weekend. I'm one of these guys. I got 2 kids, and on the weekend, if it's not a true football weekend, we're running around a bunch. So I'm not like glued to the TV watching as much sports as sometimes I'd like to. And sometimes I'm kind of forced to just sort of try to keep my finger to the wind and sort of see what people are kind of talking about. And over the course of the weekend, it seemed like, people were talking about a couple of things. Braves obviously taking 2 of 3 from the Giants, but that's probably more just my crowd. But beyond that, people were talking about the awful week 1 for Nebraska, or I should say week 0 performance from Nebraska. But the thing that got the most chatter, I'm talking about text messages, social media, everything. Did y'all see what happened to ESPN on TV yesterday? Now, this is one of those things that if you know, and if you don't, maybe you don't care. But there's all kinds of chatter about this. So we talked on Friday's show about the big kickoff weekend that ESPN was doing. Rabun County played. Gunnar Stockton, we'll have a chance to see him on TV on Friday night on Peachtree TV. He put on a big show for the ESPN cameras over the course of the weekend. That's just going to let some of what happen. But you also had the Sunday game between IMG Academy, who big power program out of Bradenton, Florida, supposed to be playing a team out of the state of Ohio called Bishop Sycamore, with supposedly a bunch of FBS-level prospects that had magically moved in to the program over the course of the offseason. Now, here's a couple things about this. First of all, the school is named Bishop Sycamore. A quick Google search, and some people online were talking about this. There is no Bishop Sycamore. That's just normally a school is named like this is named after like Bishop Gorman. There was a Bishop Gorman, right? I mean, there is no Bishop Sycamore. First of all, there's that thing doesn't exist as an entity in terms of a person, to have a school named after them. Beyond that, this Bishop Sycamore team had played on Friday and then played IMG again on Sunday. They lost 50-something to nothing. It could have been 200 to nothing. I mean, it was so bad that the ESPN commentators were actually apologizing for the game during the game, saying that the health and safety of the players on the Bishop Sycamore side was actually in jeopardy because they had no business being on this field. This was essentially a scam. ESPN got scammed by this supposed high school team to get a game with IMG Academy on national television. Y'all, it's not even a school. If you Google Earth the school building, there is no school there. It's just like a P.O. box. It's like a lot, empty lot. They played 6 games last year. They lost all of them in kind of embarrassing fashion. They are playing a supposed national schedule this year, so it's not just ESPN that got scammed. Although you got to think that some of the games they did schedule with some of the big teams in the country, the reason why they got those games was because they were able to say, hey, we're playing IMG Academy on ESPN, so therefore you might as well schedule us too. In fact, there's even some online chatter. Now, I can't confirm this. I really can't confirm any of this, but it's all over the internet. The most salacious rumor of all is that the quarterback's actually already graduated high school in Maryland and came back and basically rebooting his career now, which, listen, who of us hasn't wanted to do that? Kind of go back to high school and do it all over again and do it better the second time than the first time. There is a little bit of rumors that might be the deal there on that front. Y'all gotta, if you haven't seen the story, you got to find this. It is crazy what goes down to the point where ESPN's like, listen, we thought they had some college prospects. We couldn't verify those prospects. It's a terrible look for ESPN, even though their games on this are actually, I guess, put together by kind of a third-party outfit. But listen, you're ESPN, man. If you're putting this on your TV, you got to know what you're putting out there. Not a good look for ESPN, but a bizarre, situation there on Saturday will make that your SEC through. All right, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, let's turn our attention back to UGA for a moment. And we told you, listen, you head towards the game day on Saturday, you know the Georgia issues. Georgia's thinking about its defensive secondary, the injuries that have piled up, the need to upgrade that offense to kind of match what the best teams in the country have done. Unsettled on the offensive line, maybe a bit, but you should understand that on the other side of the field, in the other camp here this week, Clemson remains a little bit unsettled too, and things aren't all perfect in Tigerland right now. In fact, I mentioned a moment ago the fact that Georgia, trying to figure out who its starting center is going to be in light of the Warren Erickson injury, and certainly thinking about left tackle for sure. Clemson's got an ongoing competition as well to name a starter at center. That's still very much unsettled. It's been a huge talk if you're reading Clemson message boards right now. When Dabo Swinney meets with reporters, he's almost always asked about it. I believe at last check there were 3 guys still a part of the competition. In fact, let me go back to about a week or so ago. Dabo Swinney, saying, hey, we haven't figured it out yet, but now's the time to get it decided about who that starting center for Georgia against Georgia is going to be. This is Dabo Swinney talking about that.
Dabo, is there a date, sort of timeline by which you would like to have a starting center to move forward, or is that something that could continue well into, I guess, game week?
Possibly, yeah, it possibly could. We'll watch this tape tonight, and then again, we'll start honing in on the personnel and how we want to rep. Anything can happen. 2 weeks from now, you still got to go practice well. Nobody at this point is entitled to go be the starter. You still got to go earn it every day and continue to earn it every day and perform well. And, next week, I think we'll start honing in a little bit on 2D and the threes that are kind of right there as well. And get ready to go play.
So that's Dabo there saying we're going to try to figure all this out. I guess Matt Bockhurst, who's a guard now in the Clemson program, sounds like some Clemson fans think that he may be the leader in all of this, but it's like 3 guys in total who are kind of competing to be that guy. So a little bit unsettled. And, Clemson offensive line was not great against Ohio State in the college football playoff either. In fact, far from great. So I'm not saying, and that proves that Georgia's going to go out there and beat Clemson because they don't have a starting center yet. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying, as Kirby Smart told you when Warren Erickson got hurt, you don't mess around. You don't play around with center. That you got to make sure you got your really strong guy. And in fact, there are a lot of NFL teams who maybe at one point in time would have said, hey, you want your best guy to be at left tackle? That's the position that matters the most. There are a lot of NFL teams kind of rethinking that the premium position on the offensive line now for some NFL teams actually is center, and college isn't so far away from that being true for them either. That's how much responsibility the center has for identifying certain things about the defense, making the quarterback feeling comfortable, and just kind of keeping that engine humming when it comes to the offense. So Georgia's had its issues with center because of the injury to Warren Erickson and the potential emergence of a guy like Cedric Von Braun or whoever it ends up being for week 1 there against the Tigers. But on the other side of the field, Clemson dealing with some of that kind of stuff too. So if you're watching for that enemy intel this week, watch what is said about Clemson at the center position. You better believe big spotlight on that position group, knowing that Jordan Davis on the other side, Georgia defensive line is very good. Interior of the Clemson offensive line is going to be tested. And for now, that group, a little bit like Georgia, a little bit unsettled. Let me also say this as we get ready to wrap things up today. We talked about this on Friday's show. Don't forget, offensive lineman Jacob Hood here this afternoon on this Monday gets ready to make his college choice. DawgNation very closely monitoring that situation for Hood, who's got a lot of SEC teams in the mix for his final decision. And if you want to go back and hear more thoughts on kind of what Hood is as a player and kind of how he could fit in for Georgia, Jeff Sintel from Friday on our program On the Road, assisted by AAA, did a great job of breaking down the status with Hood. ahead of a decision here on this Monday afternoon, so make sure you pay close attention to that. Gatorade roll call. How about a golden shoe winner? And a lot of folks trying to make use and enjoyment of their last weekend before the season begins, including our buddy up in NorCal, S. Highland 23. A little long drink strong, nice looking cigar, giving you a Go Dogs. You love to see folks having a good time on that final weekend before the season. Hopefully we're all smoking cigars in celebration come Saturday night. That's our golden shoe winner. How about a Gatorade countdown? Just 61 days from right now. Dogs beat Florida. We'll see tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella, window and door of Georgia. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. R.S. Andrews can be trusted to do all that for you. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. So fun day for us. We started our first and 15 on video a little earlier today. That's on the DawgNation homepage and the DawgNation app. So if you got a chance to tune in, check that out. We really appreciate you doing that. Also now for our traditional cool down with your comments there too. We'll do a few of these and then we'll get ready to bounce off after that. And I'm going to try to keep the comment section in our DawgNation.com here or there as well. Robert Batcher checking in to say turnovers are always going to be a key, and you better believe that there as well. Brian W. on DawgNation.com saying if they're able to roll JT out of the pocket and buy some time, JT will have a big game. And it's one of the things that I don't think that you ought to discount is the idea that there is more mobility for Daniels right now, that he's healthier than he was. And there was like some, erroneous reporting at the beginning of last season that he was, kind of fully healthy and ready to go. That obviously turned out, not quite to be true. And, how healthy was he come Florida? I remember being a little bit, just to be completely honest with you, a little bit frustrated that, I wanted to play that game against Florida, and apparently he just wasn't ready to do that yet, but then got a chance to play the following week against Missouri and really showed some pretty impressive stuff there when he did that. And the thing that you get the sense of is that he's even healthier now than he was then. And the way it may show up is that mobility, not just the comfort and confidence with which he'll plant himself, but also the ability that he has to extend plays just a little bit longer. That extra second can matter, right? I mean, sometimes football really kind of comes down to just, a second here and there. And, if he can roll to his right, buy himself just a little bit more time, then that's sometimes enough. HR Picking Stuff says, what's UGA's record when Kirby wears a visor? Is there any game he hasn't worn a visor to? So I guess his record is whatever it is, because doesn't he always wear a visor? Buzz LOLOL says Clemson's not seeing the playoffs if they lose. I hope you're right about that, because, like the thing that I think could get really frustrating from Georgia fans is, I'm just being honest with you, is that if Georgia beats Clemson but loses narrowly to Alabama in the SEC championship, the right thing to do is to put Georgia in as a second SEC team in the playoff over a team like Clemson if you're making that head-to-head comparison. That's just the right thing to do. But I don't trust the college football playoff selection committee to do the right thing there. And it's not because I think they have an anti-Georgia bias. I don't think that. I just think they have an illogical bent. They don't seem to look at college football in kind of a logical way. Now, I do think that they find two SEC teams in the playoff fairly distasteful. They want college football to be a national sport. That's what a lot of the discussion over the course of the last couple of years has been, to increase the efficacy of this sport beyond just that kind of southern Sun Belt region. But if Georgia look, if we're sitting here the second Monday in December saying that our team, Georgia, is 12-1 with a win against Clemson, a win against Florida on a neutral site, and a narrow loss to Alabama in the SEC championship. I'm sorry. You have to say at that point in time, Georgia's done its job. That's a successful season to that point in time. And yes, I want to beat Alabama in the SEC championship, and no, I'm not looking to concede that. And, obviously Georgia would have a really good chance to win that game if it was played. On and on and on, you could go with all that kind of stuff. But if you're playing in that spot, in that moment, you're 12-1, the only loss is a close one to Bama in the SEC championship, then Georgia would have done its job, I believe, over the course of the season's first 13 games and ought to be rewarded with a trip to the college football playoff. Boy, I can't trust the committee to do that. I really can't. G. Grace Bama Boy asking about Dominic Blaylock. No, not quite ready for Blaylock, I don't believe. Paul Moon wondering about DJ Uyunglele getting rushing yards. I'd be surprised if that's the case, unless something crazy happens. I'd be surprised if that's the case. P. Rich says, I'm really interested to see how Kirby's progressed as a coach this weekend. Definitely going to need championship-level coaching to go along with the talent. Yeah, I mean, I know some people kind of point out like in-game coaching stuff for Kirby Smart. For me, I don't have that big of a problem with a lot of the in-game decisions. I mean, look, I didn't love the faked punt against Alabama in 2018, but it's important to note, Georgia didn't lose that game because Kirby Smart faked the punt. If anything, Kirby faked the punt because he thought the game was trending towards a loss anyway. I mean, I've had very smart people who know the situation very well tell me that in that particular spot, and they even kind of said it in the moment, in that particular spot, the only thing that Kirby could have done was do that because the game was just kind of getting away from him, that he kind of rolled the dice. Was it a well-designed play fake? Did it have a chance of working? Probably not, but it may speak more to the desperation of the moment. That's not the reason Georgia lost that game in 2018. Not a good decision, but indicative of where that game was trending. Probably the worst in-game decision Smart may have made was the faked punt, or I should say faked field goal against LSU in 2018. Now, even if that had gone differently, Georgia probably still loses that day. Georgia had a really rough go of it against the Tigers in Baton Rouge. But that was not a great in-game decision. Ultimately, though, I don't have a lot of issue with individual in-game decisions from Kirby Smart. But as I said off the top of the show today, what I do want to see more of, though, is Georgia proving itself against these national championship caliber programs. The big wins for Georgia have come against teams that don't really win games in the college football playoff. A couple times against Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Auburn in the 2017 SEC championship, Florida a couple of times, 2018, 2019, pretty prominently there. Those are really nice wins. Those are validating wins. Those are wins that prove that Kirby Smart is among the best coaches in college football. But to be the best coach in college football, you've got to beat guys who are also winning college football playoff national championships. 2 cracks against Ed Orgeron, hasn't done that. 3 cracks against Nick Saban, hasn't done that. Gets a crack at Dabo Swinney on Saturday, gets a chance to do that. And, above all, even if the game doesn't quite go the way that Georgia fans want it to, it can't be what happened last year where a game against Alabama slips away and becomes, a 17-point loss, and the 20-point loss to LSU in 2018, the 27-point loss to LSU in 2019, the 20-something point loss to Auburn in 2017. You can't have this game get away from you, certainly, and you have every reason to believe that Georgia has a chance to win it. And then for those who have questions about Kirby Smart in game, that's what a win like this provides for you. A chance to say, yeah, look at what we're capable of doing right now. Let me go to Facebook for a moment, and we'll come back over to our various comment sections, including at DawgNation.com here in just a bit there, too, and the DawgNation app. All right, over here on video. It would be smart if I'd have this pulled up earlier because Facebook is a mess. All right, here we go. On Nick Roundtree predicting Jack Podlesny to have a big day on Saturday. Yeah, boy, you love the idea of that. Somebody said the DawgNation app did not send a push notification. Should we be getting a notification? That's a really good question. I actually don't think you get a notification for the video, although I wonder if we could send a post that would serve as a notification. What we're really trying to do, and I know you're going to roll your eyes and say, yeah, BA, good luck with that, is hopefully in life I have some strengths, and like everybody else, I have some weaknesses. Punctuality is one of my weaknesses just because, listen, I try to sometimes say that there's an inverse relationship between orderliness and progress, and hopefully I veer in the direction of progress, which sometimes doesn't lend itself to orderliness. But the point is like some days we start at 10:06, some days we start at 10:02, some days we started as late as I think we've started as late as 10:15. So what we're trying to do is start on the nose at 9:45. That's why we're calling it First and 15. We're going to really try to hammer that time home at 9:45. Now, it could be that my bosses hear this and they say, oh, well, hey, if we just publish a post at 9:45, then that can serve as a notification. And maybe that's what we will do. But I think in absence of that, we're trying to really hammer that 9:45 time home. That if, much the same way your favorite TV show starts at, I guess in the old days, TV shows started at a certain time. Maybe there's less of that than there used to be. But the point is that we're trying to hammer that 9:45 start time home. Now, the regular show, because the regular show is not changing, right? And that was really important to me as we kind of expand ourselves, that I didn't want the regular show to be noticeably different. So at 10 a.m., the show that it's always been the show starts, right? And so that's kind of how that goes. But at 9:45, we're doing the 1st and 15. Chase Jesse Barbie says the MVP for Saturday will be Jake Camarda, keeping the Tiger offense pinned back in the bad field position all day. Listen, I don't mind that at all. I don't want to see Georgia punt a ton, but when it does, flipping the field is valuable. Kevin Chapman says there's only one best coach, and right now he's at Alabama. Hope Kirby becomes the best, but not there yet. And that's all fine and well, Kevin. I think everybody would agree with you. But I think you would also probably agree with me that the way that you get there, the steps that you take towards getting there, are winning games against the other coaches who are close. And while Nick Saban is the best, there's no coach closer to being Saban than Dabo Swinney because he's beaten him twice. So, to borrow a line from Ric Flair, who once many times said to be the man, you got to beat the man, until you beat the man that is Nick Saban, nice appetizer of that main course is beating the man who has twice beat the man. You follow me on that? That December you get a chance to maybe beat Nick Saban head-to-head, but as a way of proving Georgia worthy of being able to do that, how about beat the man who beat the man? Beat Dabo Swinney, who was beating Nick Saban a couple times. Jimmy Durham asks a great question. How many sacks can the offensive line give up and the Dogs win? That is a really good question. What do you think, Jimmy? Because for some reason I'm coming up with the idea of around 3 in my mind. There's some stats out there about how debilitating 3 dry, like 3 and out. Think about that. Like in a good game like this, if you go 3 and out 3 times, your chances of winning have gone, down into the toilet, really. And sacks can kind of contribute to that there as well. It's the kind of thing that gets you off the field with no points scored many times. So for some reason, I'm thinking 3. I mean, it's probably not acceptable to say there's going to be no sacks allowed in a game like this, and hopefully that's true for both sides. But boy, not about 3. Somebody mentioned the comment went away fast that Darnell Washington. I guess he talked about something on social media. I mean, listen, I hate to be the Grinch that stole the season opener here. I don't believe that Darnell Washington's playing against Clemson. I think it'd be fun if he did, but I don't believe he is. Our good friend Tennille Calvino says she doesn't believe I can be there at 9:45. We were on time today. And hopefully we're going to keep doing that. Jason Barrett says, what receiver makes the first catch for Georgia on Saturday? I believe I'll go Kyrus Jackson with the first catch. I might say Jermaine Burton with the first touchdown. But something about Kyrus getting the first catch seems about right. Somebody says my knowledge of Google Earth is not up to speed. That's probably about right. I still don't. That Bishop Sycamore is not a real school, though. I mean, it's like an online school, and that's even putting it generous. Y'all should read that story. It's crazy. Football Scoop, I think, is the one that had the best stuff. Jacob O'Neill says you owe us 10 minutes worth of comments, no cap. Jacob, I don't think we've ever had less than 10 minutes worth of comments, and we're still bouncing through here pretty good. We've got to get ready to go in a minute, but we're doing pretty good right now. Facebook comments coming pretty fast today too. Randy Hall says how many written warnings for punctuality. Yeah, I mean it's just like everybody's not good at something, right? And that's just kind of one of my things. And it's not because I'm not I'm getting ready for the show. It's just sometimes it's like around 9:53 I'll be like, ooh, let me do this other thing. And let me completely change what I was going to do and now do something completely different. And sometimes that backs you up a little bit. So it's all about the planning and preparation. Nick Roundtree giving us a few more good Ric Flair lines. You got to walk that aisle and don't forget to style and profile. Yeah, listen, Flair is the best. Miriam Martin Corbin says, would love to see you on Saturday. Yeah, we'll try to give folks an idea of where we're going to be. The honest truth is I don't know where we're going to be, but we'll try to get that news out there. Bill Sanders says that this is kind of like a number one contenders match between Kirby and Dabo. Yeah, I like that. Ben Thomason gives you a Bowers is running over people. My God, a freshman. That's fun to think about. Chris Branham says, however many sacks we give up, we're going to get more of our own. That's actually a pretty good point by Chris, that maybe the best way to think about a game like this is about net totals, net sack differential, net yardage differential, obviously net point differential, that thinking about this in comparison to what you allow, that's probably a pretty good point from Chris there. Epic Robinson. Epic's a little bit of a name collector. I think he's going to add Bishop Sycamore to his name collection. Barry Watkins points out an interesting fact that talk about who Kirby has beaten and who Georgia's beaten. Obviously, great success against Gus Malzahn, who had the great success against Nick Saban. It's going to, and Georgia's had success against the guy who had success against Saban, but as Georgia fans are well aware of, not Saban himself, which is kind of an interesting thing. Greg Clanton says on the page of DawgNation.com, throw to our running backs, yards after catch will make a big difference against Clemson. I think that's totally true. Now, I'm also thinking back to, if you go back and rewatch the Notre Dame game from 2019, which, to be honest, was a little bit of a frustrating day, I think. Great crowd, fun win, but Georgia did not play a great game against Notre Dame in 2019. Just not play a great game at all. And I think one of the things that was a little bit frustrating about that game is that there was a lot of first half offensive plays that just didn't go for very much. And it was a lot of lateral throws. I don't mean like true laterals. I mean, lateral as opposed to vertical. And a lot of that seemed designed like we're talking about right now. Hey, get a playmaker out in space, let him make a man miss. And unfortunately, and I guess maybe you give the Irish some credit for that, they made some tackles and, the chance to make a man miss, so to speak, didn't happen. And so, look, there's a chance that would happen on Saturday there as well. Skalski and some of those guys have been around for a long time. I mean, in his case, he's been around for 100 years. I think he played for Danny Ford. But, you put the Clemson tacklers in a position to bring a man down or let it go for a big game. They may make some tackles, but I absolutely believe what the commenter said here. I mean, ultimately, the best offense for Georgia might be a Zamir White, a Kendall Milton, a Kenny McIntosh, a James Cook in space with one chance to make one move and turn a 4-yard gain into a 12-yard gain. That may be as good as it gets. Austin says, are we doing the betting show this year? Funny you should ask that. We are doing the betting show. It'll be back on the Dog Nation video channels on Friday. I'm actually really looking forward to that. I think there are a few interesting point spreads for SEC college football this weekend. A couple of top 25 matchups. A lot of people who like Louisiana against Texas. I'm more interested in the upset for Arkansas week 2. You got 2 ranked games in the Big Ten. You got Penn State and Wisconsin. You got Iowa, Indiana. The fun one is Alabama-Miami, because Miami, is a team that a lot of folks think of kind of like top 10 type caliber. But Alabama has been a rubber stamp guarantee, easy cover week 1 in these non-conference games. Like that, from a gambling, this is why I kind of like following point spreads and gambling, is because it just makes certain games seem more interesting. And when you attach a 19.5 point spread to an Alabama-Miami game, all of a sudden that game gets much more interesting, because if you believe this one for Alabama is going to be as easy as its recent week 1 games have been, then there are places that you can profit from that information. Ronald asking about Jake Fromm. Have they made their final roster decision on that yet? I don't know. I know that he had a nice preseason moment the other day, and I know we're getting down to the cut down time, but I'm not aware of if that's actually happened. Jermaine King says he's still in the practice squad as of today. So I do know there had been some chatter. I know the Buffalo News had written about this, about whether or not the Bills wanted to keep 3 active quarterbacks. And obviously the thing that you got to think about there on that is, because for the teams with 3 quarterbacks, like one of the weird, obscure NFL rules is the 3rd quarterback is not active on game day anyway, barring injury. So, for a team that keeps 3 quarterbacks, the quarterback is not an active player. So if you want more active players available on your roster, then you don't want a 3rd quarterback. But by keeping Fromm on the practice squad, you obviously have a chance to still have, control over him, and in the event of injury, bring him up to the big club, as they would say in baseball, but you have to hope he cleared waivers to be able to do that. So that was like one of the things that he was facing, and I'm making all this sound like Adam Schefter, and the truth is I don't 100% know all of this, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, that if they did not want to keep him on the active roster, they had to hope he cleared waivers so they could put him on the practice squad, and it sounds like they've probably done that, at least on the basis of what the commenters are saying over here. All right, we got to get ready to go. One or two more and we're gone. On YouTube, quickly. Green Soldier weighing in. Jordan Bowman going back and forth with Worm here a little bit. To quote Gretchen Mall in Rounders, I can't believe you still know someone named Worm. Although I'm just messing with Worm a little bit on that. Is it Skylar Thomas or Schuler Thomas? Either way, Luke Ford had a couple nice moments for Illinois, and Brett Bielema, his era as coach there in Champaign with the Illini, gets off to a nice start. Zebulon Owen says they are stacked. Media is blinded by the big names around college football. Bama has a good defense. Maybe, just maybe, A&M may have one too. My top three. Yeah, listen, I think A&M's undervalued right now. Brian McPhail says, who's the leading rusher on Saturday? I'll take Zamir White on that. Scott Harris says, if JT holds the ball more than 3 seconds, I'd be surprised. Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes back to what Jake Fromm always did really well, right? Fromm made a good, quick decision. Now, sometimes you could point to moments in which he didn't make the best possible decision he could made, but he made a good, quick decision. And maybe for Daniels on Saturday, making a good, quick decision is the best thing he could do to neutralize what could be a very good Clemson pass rush. Nature Gator on the subject of Will Shipley. Yeah, you got to know where he is on Saturday for sure, and you got to hope that it is not a coming out party for him. Let's see what else. A lot of comments rolling in here on Facebook today. Jesse Jones says defense going to be ready. Saw that Ross scored a touchdown in the scrimmage, but it was Clemson ones versus everyone. Yeah, I mean, it's a big day. It's a big day for the Georgia defense. Big challenge. And, listen, I'm a fan of Justin Ross, but I'm not quite so sure how healthy he's going to be on Saturday. Obviously, I'm like every other, observer of recruiting. I thought Will Shipley was a very interesting prospect. But, this is not a proven group of Clemson playmakers. They are probably very good because Clemson playmakers typically are. But it is not a proven bunch necessarily. So interesting stuff all the way around. We will break it down every which way. We'll overanalyze it almost for sure, and then we'll get ready for Saturday. But for now, we've got to go. So thanks for being here for our R.S. Andrews Cooldown. Y'all check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution online at ajc.com. Reaction to a preseason game for Atlanta last night where I guess it briefly seemed like Matt Ryan might play, then he didn't. I know Kyle Pitts got involved in the action. Looked like Pitts was pretty good form there ahead of the season opener. So interesting stuff from Atlanta last night in a primetime game against Cleveland. But maybe for those hoping to see a look at Matt Ryan, not getting a chance to do that. But our buddy D-Led, the rest of the team, got good coverage of that over at AJC.com. As I said before, Braves take 2 of 3 from the Giants. That's pretty impressive and a little bit of a signal that Atlanta ought to be compared right now to some of the better teams in the National League. A lot of that obviously coming out of the National League West, and Atlanta sending a pretty big message with all of that. The Mets are a total disaster. That's a fun thing to read about there, too. They've just turned into just an absolute nightmare. Fans fighting with the team fighting back, owner. I love Steve Cohen because he always gets involved in stuff like this. This time, no different on that. So you can read all about that at AJC.com, Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Also, serious stuff there, too. Herschel running for U.S. Senate and coronavirus, all that kind of stuff, too. Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com for a lot more on that. Y'all check out R.S. Andrews. Of course, our buddy Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews will be with us for our gambling show, Go With The Flow, later on this week. Good times there. What's not good times, though, is if your air conditioning unit goes out. So don't let that happen. Get that tired unit that you know is on its last legs. Get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Just find R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com. Y'all have a great day. Thanks for being here for DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Look forward to seeing you back here again tomorrow.